Hello, everyone, and welcome to Radical Thinker, the place where we always challenge Western media narratives and perspectives. Today is Thursday, 16th of April 2026, and we are entering day 48 of the American and Israeli war imposed on the Islamic Republic of Iran. I didn't make a video yesterday because 2 days ago nothing relevant really happened, so I decided to take a break and let the events unfold in order to have something relevant to discuss and analyze. But yesterday there have been some developments, some declarations, and some events which are worth discussing in this video. I'm going to start with Donald Trump. He posted on Truth Social that he's trying to get a little breathing room between Israel and Lebanon. It has been a long time, he says, since the two leaders have spoken, like for the 34 years, and it will happen tomorrow. Nice. President Donald J. Trump, he's referring most probably to a meeting which is supposed to happen today between the ambassadors of Lebanon and the ambassador of Israel in Washington, or maybe, who knows, in the following days, phone call between the president of Lebanon and the president of Israel. And what is the catch with this? Why the Americans really want to push for negotiations, and they put a lot of pressure on the Lebanese side to come to the negotiating table with Israel. Although, according to the Lebanese constitution, negotiating with Israel, it's banned, because Israel, it's for the Lebanese and not only for the Lebanese. A rogue nation, it's an enemy nation who is still occupying parts of Lebanese territory. I'm talking about the contested Sheba farms. And they are currently engaged in the ground invasion in the southern part of Lebanon. They are fighting for weeks and weeks in the cities, the small towns of Kiam and Bin Shbeil, where their ground invasion has been met with fierce resistance by the Shia resistance in Lebanon by Hezbollah. Yesterday, another day and another night of hard fighting in the south. The Israelis seemed to be stuck in a quagmire there. They don't have the ability to advance and make relevant progress. This doesn't mean that things are easy for Hezbollah. No, not at all. The war is very bloody, and Hezbollah is also losing a lot of soldiers. But strategically speaking, they have managed to counter the ground invasion until now, and the Israelis have been continuously failing to achieve their objectives. Their main objective was to enter in the southern part of Lebanon and cross the Litani River. They want also to dismantle Hezbollah. They have big plans, but I'm not so sure that these plans are achievable, and therefore the Americans have entered the arena in this conflict, and they are creating this scenario of negotiations in order to push the Lebanese government, which is more or less a puppet of the Americans and of the Israelis. They want to push them into direct negotiations, which are illegal, as I said, according to the Lebanese constitution. But what is the aim? The end goal is to create a lot of friction inside the Lebanese society between the various sects living in Lebanon, in order to create another civil war, to make certain sects like the Maronite Christians, the Sunni Muslims, the Druze, and so on, fight against the Shias, fight against the Hezbollah resistance movement, because they want to impose on the Lebanese state to disarm Hezbollah, which is nonsense. Hezbollah has more military power and more capabilities than the Lebanese army has had for the past 30 years, so it will be very hard. But this doesn't mean that these puppets in charge in Beirut would not do the unthinkable and push the Lebanese army to go and try to dismantle Hezbollah by force, thus leading to another civil war, exactly what Israel wants other people to fight their wars. And if such a scenario would occur, then of course we would see Jolani and his minions from Syria entering Lebanon and opening another front against Hezbollah. it seems very, very obvious for the Israelis and for the Americans that these resistance movements like Hamas and Hezbollah, they are very strong and resilient, and it's not so easy to destroy them. Israel tried with Hamas for more than 2 years in Gaza. They carpet bombed Gaza into oblivion. They used ground troops, a terrestrial invasion, and still Hamas exists and it operates in Gaza. It's the same about Hezbollah. They bombed Beirut during the 60 plus days war 1.5 years ago. For more than 1 year, they have killing Hezbollah members almost on a daily basis with target attacks with drones and missiles during the so-called ceasefire that Israel broke for multiple times. I think they broke it like 500 times or something like this. And now, during the war with Iran, Israel tries again a ground invasion. Last time they tried it in 2006 and it didn't work out so well for them. But now they had big plans. They thought that because Iran will be occupied defending itself against the American aggression, therefore Hezbollah will be on its own and it will be an easy prey for the IDF. It doesn't seem to be like this. Hezbollah is resilient, it's fighting, and it's also able to ambush Israeli troops in the southern part of Lebanon very, very efficiently, and they managed to kill a lot of Israeli troops. But the IDF, as it is its policy, they are censoring heavily what is happening on the ground, and we don't have a clear picture of the Israeli casualties. We just know that thousands of Lebanese, many of them civilians, have been mass murdered by the Israeli bombing campaign. Especially last week, we saw in Beirut more than 100 bombings in Beirut aimed to kill civilians and to spread terror. They didn't achieve nothing strategically. They didn't manage to force Hezbollah to back down. On contrary, the resistance is more and more resilient and steadfast in South Lebanon. So this is the situation. We have seen yesterday a lot of posts regarding a possible ceasefire. Some people were saying that the Americans are putting pressure on Netanyahu to reach a ceasefire in Lebanon, which should be connected to the American and the Iranian ceasefire. We were expecting this ceasefire to come into effect last evening, but it didn't happen as of now. Israel has rejected the US request for the ceasefire in Lebanon because this was pushed for by the Iranians and the Pakistanis. This is what the Israeli media publishing outlet Khan is saying. So we don't have a ceasefire for now in Lebanon. We saw the speaker of the Iranian parliament posting yesterday. He wrote on Twitter, the completion and consolidation of a comprehensive ceasefire in Lebanon will be the result of the resistance and the steadfast struggle of the great Hezbollah and the unity of the axis of resistance. The United States must comply with the agreement. Resistance and Iran are one soul, both in war and in ceasefire. America should withdraw from Israel first. Mistake? Yeah, definitely they should. But only by force they will be convinced to do this. And unfortunately, we are not yet in that scenario where relevant pressure, military pressure, has been put on the Americans to decouple from the Israelis. But hopefully in the near future, we are going to reach that point. As we see, the Iranians are talking about trying to reach a ceasefire in Lebanon to help Hezbollah in this situation. But the Israelis are unhinged. They don't seem to care. They don't take into account the American opinion, the fact that the Americans, at least verbally, they are putting a little bit of pressure on the Israelis to halt the invasion and to stop the hostilities, at least for 1 week. Yesterday we had the visit of the chief of staff of the Pakistani army, the Field Marshal Munir. He came to Tehran leading a senior political and security delegation, and he was carrying, it seems, a new message from Washington for the Iranian side. We don't have yet clear what was that message. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Iran didn't release a statement regarding this meeting between the Iranian foreign minister and Iranian officials and the Pakistani army chief Asim Munir. Probably the Americans are still using the Pakistanis to gain some time for the Israelis to rearm and also for themselves. In this time, they are imposing the naval blockade, trying to squeeze the Iranian economy and trying to make the Iranians suffer more and more and more, thinking that this will manage for the American side to get some concession from the Iranians. But it seems that the Iranians have been prepared also for this scenario, for the naval blockade scenario, and they are moving around 20 million barrels of oil through offshore networks to bypass the US port blockade. We have seen yesterday also Zelensky, the clownish president of Ukraine, making statements. He says the Strait of Hormuz is closed and of course we want to reopen it. Given our experience with the blockade of the Black Sea, we know how to handle such situations. Zelensky wants basically to help unblock the Strait of Hormuz, but America hasn't asked us yet. So the omnipotent American empire, which possesses nuclear weapons and has the biggest air force and naval force in the world, is not able to open the Strait of Hormuz, and therefore it's obliged somehow to impose a naval blockade, at least to do something. And Zelensky and his Ukrainian minions, they think that they can do better, and they offer their so-called expertise in opening the Strait of Hormuz. This is getting ridiculous day by day. Zelensky wants to show himself as a relevant actor. He tried to get some money from the Emiratis to send some so-called specialists with expertise in countering Russian and Iranian drones. Things didn't work so well. Some of them got killed by Iran in a bombing during the hostilities some weeks ago. And now he wants to sell sand in the desert. He wants to tell everyone that Ukraine has the ability to unlock the Strait of Hormuz, which is a mockery. I mean, no one takes Zelensky serious anymore. And when I'm saying nobody, I don't think about the European Union, because in the European Union, unfortunately, there are still a lot of idiots who are taking Zelensky and the so-called Ukrainian cause seriously, and they are ready still to give the Ukrainians millions and millions of euros, if not more, just to support a war which has been lost at least by 2 years ago by the Ukrainian side. But this is how things are, unfortunately, for now. So what other things happened yesterday? As I said, the Pakistanis are still playing this game. They are in the middle between the Americans and the Iranians. They want to be a relevant mediator, actor on the international scene, and try to help bridge the gaps between the Americans and the Iranians and reach an agreement which it's not feasible. I don't think that it can happen. The Americans don't want such an agreement to be reached. They have other plans, and their plan is not to reach an agreement with the Iranians or to remove the sanctions. No, they are just buying time. Probably they are already putting the Lego pieces in place for the next move in this war. And according to the Washington Post, it becomes more clear that the Pentagon will be sending these days around 10,000 troops and several more warships to the Middle East. This deployment will include aircraft carriers and Marine Corps units, which will be added to the nearly 50,000 US troops already stationed in the region. So if this looks like setting the ground for a ceasefire and for an agreement, I don't think it is. On contrary, the Americans are planning for the next step in the escalation war against Iran. They are bringing more ground troops, and probably things are not going to go as Donald Trump wants them to go. Meaning, if Iran will not capitulate in front of the excessive and maximalist American requests then and demands, then we are going to see probably the Americans trying again to do a sort of a ground invasion, because still with 60,000 troops, even with 100,000 troops, they don't have the numbers to really be able to achieve a successful ground invasion of Lebanon. They need more than that. They need at least 500,000 troops, which is not feasible in the current scenario. It will really squeeze the American military power to get 500,000 troops in the Middle East. It will be very hard for them to achieve this. But they will try probably again some sort of a special operation. They are desperate to get their hands on the uranium, the stockpiled uranium that the Iranians are hiding very well. We saw that they tried like 1 week ago when we had the shit show with the airplane and with the pilot, which was close to be captured by the Iranians. They tried under the disguise of a rescue operation. They tried to reach the nuclear facility in Isfahan and to look for the enriched uranium. It was a catastrophe. The Iranians were prepared. They were waiting for them. The American side lost a lot of aircraft, airplanes, and commando special forces helicopters. They were forced also to destroy the ammunitions and the weapons which they left behind. And after that, the propaganda machine in Washington quickly came in front of the press and in front of the worldwide audience with a bullshit story about how they used hundreds of American special forces and tens of military aircraft just to rescue one stranded airplane pilot, a colonel that no one has seen. It was obvious, and later it became even more obvious because certain sources inside US military, anonymous sources, they told how things really happened, and it's a big fiasco for the Americans. But Donald Trump is the kind of guy that when he is doing a stupid thing, he's not thinking about it. He's not changing the path. No, on contrary, he's going to double down. And this is exactly what he is doing, even when it comes to his Jesus or messianic mania. We can call it a mania. I think he's a maniac about this subject, because yesterday, after the backlash with the previous posts showing him as Jesus Christ, after his small verbal spat with the Pope in Vatican, yesterday he posted again on Truth Social. He posted an image with him and Jesus, this time, and an American flag behind him. And he said the radical left lunatics might not like this, but I think it is quite nice, President Donald J. Trump. And he's very happy that somehow some people in his MAGA base are still looking at him as a messianic figure. This guy is completely insane. He's losing the plot. More and more people, even in the United States, are openly speaking about the fact that they have a demented, paranoid, megalomaniac and narcissistic president. But unfortunately, we don't see concrete steps of removing him from power, and therefore things are going to go in the same direction, at least for now. But going back to Iran, these negotiations, as I said, Iran is not going to gain too much from them. I don't know what is the plan there. I don't know. I trust that the Iranian leaders are smart and they know what they are doing. Probably also they needed a ceasefire in order for their armed forces to regroup, rearm, and diversify their defensive capabilities and plan for the next step in this war. And probably this is a big factor in the decision to agree on a ceasefire with the Americans, because otherwise they didn't gain anything relevant. They had an advance. They were shooting down American planes. They were mocking the Americans. They were putting a lot of pressure by bombing Israel. They were controlling the Strait of Hormuz, and suddenly they decided to go on a ceasefire, which for now it's not providing them with almost anything. On contrary, we're seeing the Americans imposing a counter blockade through their own blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, which will affect to a certain degree the Iranian economy, although Iran has plans of how to counter the naval blockade, and they will use other paths and other ways to deliver the Iranian oil to their clients all over the world. But still, there will be some damage to the Iranian economy. And it's not clear what is the end goal from waiting to see what the Americans are going to do, because the Americans, it's clear that they are not going to make big concessions, especially when this administration is nothing more than a puppet of the Israelis. They are completely controlled by Netanyahu and his gang in Tel Aviv. Even J.D. Vance, after returning from Islamabad, the vice president of the United States, he openly said that during the negotiations, he was on the phone with Netanyahu. Netanyahu also was bragging about this. He was saying that J.D. Vance was such a good boy, and he was informing him about how the negotiations are going. So I don't think that this attempt at negotiations were negotiations between the Americans and the Iranians. I think it was the Iranian side with the Pakistanis and with the Americans trying to negotiate in an indirect manner with the Israelis, or I don't know. It's a very awkward situation, because it's clear that the Americans in this conflict, they don't have an independent point of view. All they do, their politicians, they are talking about the need to fight Iran for the benefit of Israel, to protect Israel, because, oh my God, what would happen if Iran would have reached the point of developing nuclear weapons, which they didn't intend to have from the get-go. But you imagine if they had nuclear weapons, what would have happened with Israel? So this is the popular political discourse in the United States. It's nothing about American interest. It's nothing about American economy. It's nothing about American security. It's not even about power projection, because fighting Iran, as we saw, didn't increase the power projections of the Americans in the Middle East. On contrary, by destroying those military bases, radars, and advanced military technology, the Iranians really cut the hand of the Americans and weakened their military prowess and their military presence and influence in the Gulf area, and also overall in the Middle East. So I really don't see a way forward. I know that Trump somehow feels under pressure because he wants to have a resolution to this conflict before the midterm elections in autumn, but for him, this outcome should be the destruction of the Iranian state, or at least the capitulation of the Iranian leadership, or sort of Venezuela-style scenario with some traitors getting the power in Tehran and being good boys and yes-men for the Americans. Even if this would happen, the Israelis would not be satisfied. They would continue to push for the effective destruction and dismantling of the Iranian state. They want Iran to be chopped up in small pieces, small little countries divided by ethnic, sectarian, I don't know, religious borders. They don't want, even if it is an American-friendly Iran, they don't want it to exist. The Israelis don't have a middle ground. They want everything to be as they desire. They want 100% the destruction of the Iranian state. And therefore, I really don't see what the Iranians are gaining by adhering to this ceasefire. And even if they would comply with the American demands, even if they would deliver the uranium stockpile, the enriched uranium stockpile to the Americans, even if they would continue with limiting their ballistic missile program, then the Americans, when the Israelis would come with something more and more and more, the sanction would not be lifted. The economy, the Iranian economy would be attacked more and more and more in order to create protests inside Iran. Then the Israelis and the Americans, through the Mossad and the CIA, would use their agents inside Iran to foment unrest, to create violent riots, and to try to topple the leadership from the inside, as they tried in the past years, and also in January, when those riots and the destruction, the burning of ambulances and everything which happened was a preparatory path for the war, which started later in February. So it's obvious that there is no real deal to be achieved currently, at least not as long as the Trump administration is in power. Maybe if Donald Trump gets removed, if there are elections in the United States, if maybe the Democrats would run the show again, if someone more reasonable would become the next president and would come with a more realistic approach, then maybe some sort of a deal would be reached. And even then, we probably would see a JCPOA type of an agreement, like the one achieved during the Obama era, which would look nice on the paper, but after, I don't know, 1 or 2 years, something would happen and the Americans will find a way to double-cross the Iranians, to cheat on them and to avoid of removing the sanctions and giving effective concessions to the Iranian side. So this is how things are working. Israel and the Americans, even if they are suffering some setbacks, they are not canceling plans of regime change. We saw in the Syrian scenario, they began in force in 2011. They poured a lot of terrorists, extremists, Wahhabi, Salafi jihadis in Syria. They created the civil war. Then we had the intervention of the Russians, of the Iranians, and later Hezbollah. They managed the axis of resistance together with the Syrian army and with the Russians. They managed to counter the ISIS-backed terror campaign in Syria. They managed to stabilize somehow the situation and to stop the war, but after many years. And then the Americans came with the Caesar's Sanctions Act. They successfully prevented Syria from rebuilding. They crippled the already weak Syrian economy, and they waited for the right moment to make the next move, and the next move happened in the end of 2024, when the Jolani and his gangs were unleashed again, when the Americans and the Israelis bribed the relevant military officers in the Syrian army, which literally left, and Jolani marched openly without encountering any resistance to Damascus. President Assad left, and we are seeing what is happening now in Syria. So never think that if the Americans and the Israelis suffered a setback now and also last June, that they are going to stop. If direct war is not going to achieve their goals of changing the regime and of destroying the Iranian state, then they will try something else. And the CIA and the Mossad repertoire of options, their menu of operations and possibilities of disrupting social peace and of creating chaos and foment civil war in Lebanon, it's endless. They will continue to try and push, as they have been trying for many years until now. But fortunately, Iran has shown great resilience, and their leaders have been very intelligent, very steadfast, and very capable to counter these schemes coming from the Americans, the Israelis, and also from some of the European lackeys, especially from Great Britain, which is a player, an active player in the operation to disrupt stability in Iran and create violence there. But they don't talk too much. This is the difference. But the British are very active. They didn't give up on their colonial ambitions, and they still have a lot of resentment against Iran and the Iranian people. Let's leave it here for today. If you have certain topics that you would like me to discuss, analyze, I don't know, comment about, feel free to write me in the comments. Let's see how the day will unfold, what will happen. And I'm really curious to see the next steps, if we are going to see another round of negotiations at the end of this week in Islamabad. Some sources are pointing in this direction, that the Americans have been asking the Pakistanis to prepare for another round of negotiations, which maybe, who knows, maybe they have a dirty plan in their mind. Probably, who knows, they would try to kill some members of the diplomatic delegation coming from Tehran. This could happen. No one knows. They are capable of anything. And if not them directly, then the Israelis would surely want to try. It was also very risky for the Iranians to get Kalibaf, the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, out of the country and to make him visible, making him also a potential target for the Israelis. The Iranian delegation really took a lot of risks just to come to Islamabad and to negotiate with the Americans. And in the end, they didn't get shit. Nothing happened for now. And this is why I'm really skeptical about this situation with the ceasefire and with really achieving an agreement with the United States. I don't think even the goal of achieving an agreement is the right path to pursue, because the Americans only learn by defeat through military means. Unfortunately, this is the reality, and Iran should have put even more pressure on the Americans and should have really targeted the vital civilian infrastructure, and energetic infrastructure in Israel, in order to cripple the Israeli state and destroy their economy and their social stability. They even had the reason to do this, because the Americans and the Israelis hit at relevant and strategic targets and relevant infrastructure inside Iran. So Iran could have easily answered at the same level. And in my opinion, this would have been a stronger leverage and a stronger move to do in this war, in order to really have the ground set later for a potential agreement. But for now, we are not in that situation, and I'm curious how Iran is planning for its next moves in this conflict. But we will see. Until tomorrow, I'm wishing you all the best.